Our ninth kid who cares is not only a survivor, but a triumphant human being. That's what the president of the Adoption Exchange calls Annie Cody. Annie volunteers at the Adoption Exchange. It's a place that is near and dear to her heart.
It may not seem like a big deal.
Uh-oh.
A family spending time together.
Here.
But for Annie Cody, every moment, every day with Pat and Bill Cody is sacred.
It's sort of a fairy tale for me, and a long story, actually.
A story of loss, love, and will, with a bad start.
It was an unsafe place. It was just full of things that an 8-year-old shouldn't be exposed to.
Annie and her siblings were moved into foster care, each with different families.
It was a little bit scary being in somebody else's house for the first night and the first week.
There would be many first nights.
And every time it didn't work out, it was kind of a hard blow.
6 families in all. It's hard to show photos of those years. There are few. No typical family snapshots of birthdays and holidays. In fact, this would become Annie's snapshot, the one the Adoption Exchange showed prospective parents.
And I saw Annie's picture there, and I thought, how wonderful.
Wonderful because Pat, who works at the Adoption Exchange, saw Annie's photo grouped with children who'd been adopted. Pat had met Annie at a party for foster kids.
And I thought, oh, what a neat kid. And so she just kind of stayed in my heart.
And her photo stayed on Pat's wall at work. A few months later, Pat got a call. There was a child who needed a temporary home. Pat and Bill are registered foster parents. Pat went to pick up the girl.
She opened the door, and it was the same girl. And I thought, holy cow. I just wanted to scoop her up in my arms and say, it's going to be okay.
Annie's adoption had fallen through.
I knew right then that they were mine, and I was theirs. I loved their house. I loved the smells. I loved the laughter. I hadn't laughed in so long, and I hadn't cried in so long. I knew I never wanted to leave.
Pat and Bill became mom and dad.
My dad dropped me off at school, and he said, Mom will pick you up after school. And I was like, Mom? Oh, Mom. You know, and she picked me up, and I hadn't been picked up from school, and I can't tell you how long.
4 years later, Annie became Annie Cody.
It's like she's been ours forever, you know?
And a devoted volunteer for the Adoption Exchange.
This is Annie. How may I direct your call? Even the simple tasks I was doing were going to make it easier for somebody else and essentially find somebody else a family, and they could be as blessed as I was.
Seeing Annie in action for me is about as good as it gets.
More than anything, Annie inspires
Paraphrasing
people
my experiences,
through her story.
there is no greater joy to me than to see a smile on a child's face. Maybe through me they'll realize that kids in the system aren't bad, that they have done nothing wrong. So that's my goal.
Congratulations, Annie Cody, a triumphant 9 kid who cares.